I'm Bob at ILikeToMakeStuff. Today we're going to make some quick and cheap open shelving. I wanted the shelves to look a little bit beefier than the typical 3/4 inch pine you would get at Home Depot. So instead, I bought a stair tread, also made out of pine, but it's 1 inch thick. For the look I was going for, I chose to take off the rounded edge, but you could leave it on there if that worked better. I cut everything down to length and then used the offcuts to cut some brackets out of. I marked out an area to cut out for the ledger and then drew a 9-inch square. From one corner I used a compass to draw a perfect arc. I rough cut the shape out on the bandsaw and then went back and trimmed it to the line. Now if you don't have a bandsaw, you could also use a jigsaw and it would work just as well. I used it as a template on the other offcuts, and then I cut out a whole bunch of them. I used the end of the belt sander to smooth out the cut marks on the curve. Then I flattened down the other edges and used a sanding block just to clean everything up. To make the panels for the corner shelves, I lined them up and made marks. Along those marks I used a biscuit joiner to cut a slot on each one. I applied glue down inside the slots along the flat surfaces and then added biscuits to one side. The pieces fit together really well, and then I put them in clamps, both from the bottom and the top, to try to keep them from warping. After a couple of hours they were dry and I took them out of the clamps, sanded the edges and the joint where the glue had spilled out. On the top side of each shelf I laid the brackets in place, squared them up, and then outlined them with a pencil. This gives me the area that I can safely drill through. It'll go right down into the bracket. I drilled a hole in each one of these and then came back with a countersink bit so that the screw head would be flush with the top of the shelf. I put some glue on each bracket and smeared it around and then lined it up on the underside of each shelf. I ran screws in through the top side, making sure to keep the bottom of the bracket flush with the table that I was working on. That way it'll be flush against the wall when they go to get mounted. I followed the same procedure for the straight shelves, they just took a lot less time. I used some wood filler to fill all the screw holes and voids in the wood, and there were quite a few. I sanded everything down once it was dry with an orbital sander and a sanding pad. Then I had to make some strips to put on the wall so that the shelves had something to hang on. I cut down some old pine from a previous project down to 1.5 inch strips. I chopped those down to length to match the straight shelves and the corner shelves, and then primed and painted everything. And man, do I dislike painting. A little tip, when you prime the wood, it'll raise the grain, so run over it with sandpaper before you put on your paint, you'll get a better finish. On each ledger, I measured in 1 inch from the edge so I knew where to drill the hole. This will help that hole to be covered up by the shelf when it gets mounted. I made sure to countersink all these holes so the screw heads wouldn't get away when I went to mount the shelves. In my friend's kitchen, I marked out where I wanted the tops of each one of the shelves to be and both sides. This just made it easier to know that I was centered and everything was evenly spaced. I leveled each ledger and drilled through the holes so I had marks on the wall. Using a bigger bit, I opened those holes up so that they would fit the anchors that I was using. These anchors can hold about 75 pounds each. I leveled it again and then drove the screws into the anchors and it was rock solid. I did the exact same thing for the other two ledgers. I did find that if you drive the screw into the anchor before you actually put the wood up, it fully expands the anchor in the wall and it's even sturdier. The shelves fit nice and tightly onto the ledger and I had to use a mallet to line them up because they were so tight. But that's actually a good thing. Once I had all three of them in place, I drilled holes from the top of the shelf down into the ledger and then drove a screw down. This stopped the shelf from coming off the ledger, but the bottom brackets were still bouncing off the wall a little bit. So I countersunk a hole into each one of the brackets and drove in a screw to the wall. Alright, so I ran into a little problem there. These stair treads are a bunch of pieces of wood laminated together, and along those glue joints they can be kind of weak. Now I didn't think about it when I was screwing in, but the wall pushed back, it was too much force for the wood, and it cracked right along that joint. Now the good thing here is that it actually split very smoothly across where the two pieces were glued together. So I can easily add some glue, stick it back on there, screw it to the wall while it dries, and it should be good as new. So since I have to use wood filler to fill all of the other holes, I'll just fill in around that crack and then touch up the paint, should be good to go. And so to avoid that on the other ones, I'm going to countersink the hole and then get a longer bit and drill into the wall, because that's what was forcing the wood to push back and crack. Alright, while I'm touching up the paint, let me tell you about the sponsor for this video, and that is Ebates. Now, I wasn't familiar with Ebates at all before they came to me, and I wasn't sure if it'd be valuable to you, but then they explained. Basically, you sign up for free with Ebates, and then going through them to online retailers that you already shop at, you get cash back on your purchases. Now, that's pretty interesting, but it got really interesting when they showed me the list of people that they work with. 1,800 online retailers, including Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, Target, eBay, Amazon, places that I spend money all the time. I figure if I spend money there, you probably do too, and this is a good way for you to get cash back on those purchases that you're already making. So Ebates saves up that cash, and then once a quarter, they send it back to you through a PayPal payment or through a check, depending on what you prefer. And they have a special thing going on right now, so that with the first $25 that you spend through Ebates, you get $10 back, and you can get that as a gift card to Target, Walmart, Macy's, Kohl's, or Ebates Cash. I'll put links to them down in the description. Go check them out, save yourself some money. Thanks to Ebates, let's go finish those shelves. And so then the last thing to clean it up, because these are old walls and they're kind of wavy, this didn't actually go all the way against it, which is to be expected, but it's really easy to fill with some caulk. So there they are. They're quick, easy, and pretty inexpensive to put up, and you can make some slight adjustments to change the look of them to fit your kitchen better. For example, on the brackets, instead of a curve, if you were to make them angled, that would just have an entirely different look, but basically the same construction. One thing I would change personally on these if they were in my kitchen is make the shelf overhang the bracket a little bit on the ends. That was just something I didn't think about ahead of time in the design process, but now seeing them in person, I think it would look better to have that overhang. Now, another thing to consider if you're doing this is the type of walls you have and whether you have access to a stud or not. So depending on the type of material that you're hanging these on, you're gonna have to use different anchors. Just make sure you do your research, find an anchor that works for plaster or drywall or brick or whatever it is you're mounting these in. And of course, it's never gonna hurt to use more anchors than you think you need. That's just gonna make them stronger and make them hold more weight. You won't have to worry about them coming down if you put too much on them. So there it is, a simple project that you could mount just about anywhere in your house. I'd love to know what you think about this, or if you have some shelves that you've made and you wanna share them, you can do that on my site, ILikeToMakeStuff.com. There's a link down there, or you can share them on my Facebook page or on Twitter, Instagram, all sorts of options. I've got a lot of other projects of all different types that you might be interested in. You can check those out here. Patreon supporters get to watch these videos early. If that's something that interests you and you want to support what I'm doing, go check out my Patreon page. That's it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.